Similar to the nervous clench of a pre-prostate exam butthole, Bloodborne is an insidiously tight experience. Also, like said butthole, at least hopefully, Bloodborne is an experience that provides exactly what you need and nothing more. There's no spillage, no overflow, no filler, and no overcrowding. No areas feel unnecessary, tacked on, or unfinished. Combat is fluid and cohesive and hugely satisfying. While many left Bloodborne wanting more, I felt it offered the perfect amount of things. The perfect number of mandatory bosses, the perfect number of optional bosses, the perfect amount of DLC and extra side content, with opportunity for more in the form of randomly generated areas and PvP, which is also just like any butthole. Unlike other members of the Souls series, Soulsborne, Seki Soulsborne, Elden Seki Soulsborne, patent pending, Bloodborne offers completely different combat mechanics for bestial and humanoid bosses. Beast bosses can be staggered by focusing on the limbs, and after enough whacking away, the boss can be stunned, at which point you have a small window to do a visceral attack. Humanoids can be parried and visceraled in a similar way, because FromSoft hasn't implemented an attack that lets you kick people in the balls yet. Unless you're like me, and you never bothered to learn how to parry, so humanoid bosses ended up taking 10 times the necessary amount of time to finally beat. Why didn't I just put in the effort? Why didn't I bother to learn? Because I'm shit at games, obviously. So with that in mind, here's my ranking for the Bloodborne bosses from easiest to hardest. If you agree, disagree, or have something completely unrelated to say, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, slap me a like and subscribe, Gov. It really helps, honest. The one Reborn is what we in the industry call a shower, not a grower. One that pops up unsolicited in your DMs and still disappoints you. I didn't ask for this, but somehow I still expected more. 1 out of 10, maybe less, if such a scale permitted it. Anyway, you know what they say, behind every horribly deformed amalgamation of man is a horde of mage women casting fireballs from the balcony. This haunted lasagna greets you at the end of a place called Yahar Ghul, not to be confused with Razar Ghul, as played by Liam Neeson in The Dark Knight Rises, and you'll have a much harder time even getting to it than you will fighting it. Yahar Ghul is an absolute baptism by fire after Rom's boss fight. You're thrust into an area where the difficulty is randomly pumped up, with strange mechanics you've never faced before, and sent on your way with a slap on the arse. For a boss that looks so horribly beastly, this guy just drops out of a hole and plops onto the floor like a huge blood-soaked turd, and then just flaps around menacingly for a bit. All of his limbs move in such weird ways as he ineffectually tries to damage you. I've heard he has an AoE, but I can't remember ever seeing it. And some blood rain thing? Maybe I saw that on my own game, maybe I saw it on a speedrun. Either way, he's very easy to visceral because he has so many limbs to stagger and ends up being such a shame.
I'm gay.
Well, call me Billy Big Balls, because I one-tried this sucker. I mean, that's no great achievement in proportion to the other bosses, but I feel like your first two choices of boss, Father Gascoigne or the Cleric Beast, really help you understand what kind of boss you're going to have an easier time with. It's a weird fact in Dark Souls. Some people are great at fighting humans, and some are great at fighting beasts, and I'm the latter, so I found this guy a complete piece of piss. We'll talk about Gascoigne later. This was also my first ever stream too, so this boy means a lot to me. I was alone in chat, talking to myself, awkwardly and nervously exploring Yharnam, and some guy came to chat to harass me about joining a PSN party with him. And then I got my first ever follower too. Their username was I Need a Girl. It was a harrowing time for a plucky streamer. With the Cleric Beast, you need to stick yourself to his big hairy ass as though he's just sat on a gothic what's-it and pummel him from behind. He's got some nasty, almost unavoidable attacks if you're standing in front of him. Particularly his grab, which you get a very small, screamy telegraph for, and it's often better to just dodge around to his booty and swat like you're killing a swarm of flies. After a while, he'll stagger and you can visceral him, which at this point in the game will be your main source of damage. All in all, this fight has a pretty cool gimmick. It's got the makings of a successful creepypasta. You blunder into some basement and see some scary shadows walking around. Their eyes are glowing, they follow you slowly and menacingly, and you can hit them as much as you want, but they'll always come back. If this was happening in an old amusement park or on an unmarked Pokemon Red cartridge, we'd have hit every nail on the head with this one. As you run low on blood vials, pelting around this big old room, you might notice a disturbance in the force. Or, better yet, you might notice some weird old sack of eyeballs roaming around in the corners of the room. The visible only when you get close enough to see her or when she casts a spell, or randomly paralyzes you out of nowhere so she can run over with an ice cream scoop and relieve you of your eyeballs. So you punch her too and she dies, unless— oh no, there's a second? It is pulse-pounding action, a twist every minute, except it's not really that intense. When you've seen it once, you've seen it 1,000 times, so you never approach this fight the same way again. It's not that deep. Just some crazy women in some far-off crazy basement doing crazy things to some crazy ominous music. Seriously, this song drones on in the background, perfectly accompanying the weird shuffle of the shadow mad ones roaming around. And like that silent fart you've let off in the gym and are now desperately trying to shake off, they follow you constantly. You have to just keep nervously moving the whole time, which adds this nail-biting tension when you realise they've cornered you. If they had a cat called Sappho, they'd be the perfect stereotype. Just two women living alone in a house they bought together, working as a team, clearly so in tune with one another that they can resurrect each other from the dead. Wow, they must be really good friends. Remember those old Scooby-Doo sketches where Shaggy and Scoob would be running away from the monster? They'd accidentally trip into a pair of curtains or something, and in their fear would run screaming down the corridor like this horrible ghastly spirit, inadvertently scaring the actual monster and getting some good laughs all round. I am absolutely convinced that this is what happened here. We are just fighting some twisted amalgamation of Lovecraftian Scooby, who's tripped and fallen through some curtains and a bird's nest and into a jewelry box and accidentally grabbed some knives. Jinkies. That's also the only justification I can think of for them being so unbelievably uncoordinated, and very easy. If you're meticulous with your playthrough before you get here, by zooming through the DLC and the Chalice dungeons to hoover up all the weapon upgrades you can get your mitts on, you'll stomp the wet nurse in less than a minute. If you're not so meticulous and play only the mandatory sections of the game, you'll still stomp the wet nurse in a minute. She's got this move where she locks onto you or your location and then spends about 12 minutes walking over to it, swinging her swords around, and you can walk all the way behind her and just deliver some careful stabs right into the base of her spine, and it'll be like she's not even noticed. She's got a crumb of HP and her attacks feel like being lightly brushed by a gentle winter breeze. She goes full sicko mode at points and summons a twin, and they both try and go ham on your ass. But all in all, this fight is a huge anticlimax. For people who take the easy ending, she's also the final boss, which must be one of the saddest send-offs you'll ever see. But to be real for a second, you are here to kill a baby, so I can see why she's so stressed out. Another final boss that can be overwhelmingly described as okay, the Moon Presence is basically like a big quadrupedal alien with a hula hoop for a face. Honestly, I've eaten casseroles more exciting than this boss fight, and I feel very neutral about casseroles. I'm also not really sure what exactly a casserole is, the scope of it I mean, which I guess is also how I feel about the Moon Presence. Does this mean the Moon Presence is a casserole? As with the Wet Nurse, even if you're not carefully combing through every bit of content in the game, she will be weirdly easy. For all her pomp and vigour as she floats menacingly into your vision, some beautiful nightmare manifesting before you, I've had a harder time trimming my toenails. She is horrendously weak, considering the Moon Presence is the creator of the entire dream you're living in, sustaining the life of every hunter that comes through in some strange alternate dimension, and forming links between worlds and civilizations past and present through the tombstones. Just got to stagger the limbs and go for the visceral. She's got some melee moves, but none are devastating, and this arena-wide AoE that leaves you at 1 HP, but allows you to regain your health using the rally system, which is a really convenient mechanic considering she sits still for a really long time after using the AoE, like for ages. Like, you'll probably beat her up before she can stand up again. It's a shame because for all the build up this fight has, and all the ends you have to go to if you want to even know this boss exists, she's such a forgettable experience that I can barely remember enough about her to speak with conviction on the topic. Looking at Bloodborne's trophy information, only roughly 45% of people ever beat Father Gascoigne. Less than half of all the people who attempt Bloodborne ever beat the first mandatory boss, which, if you ask me, is a huge waste of money. Only 36% of players ever beat VICAR AMELIA. That's right, close to a third of people who buy this game ever make it beyond the second mandatory boss. I guess the people who are really good at bestial fights still need to get past Father Gascoigne before they can try this pushover, whereas people who are good at humanoid bosses bosses probably busted their load too early at Gascoigne and then lost their drive here. I was in the former category, so after my grueling few attempts at Gascoigne, I breezed through this boss fight in a single attempt. The thing about Amelia is that she is super aggressive. She's like one of those people that stands on street corners with surveys and petitions. You have to get really good at dodging or you'll be finished. Like white cat fur on a pair of black leggings, you'll have to stick so close to her that she'll never shake you off. And the temptation is there to back away, which is only going to get you stomped flat. If you damage each of her limbs enough, she'll stagger and you can deliver a visceral directly to her face. Once she gets below a certain amount of health, she'll back off and try to heal, and you have to go absolutely ham on her to even outpace the healing here with damage, because as you know, it's illegal for the boss to heal themselves. She's here to teach aggression, because she's a hard hitter and a fast fighter. The longer you stay in that room with her, the more she'll whittle you down while preserving her own health. She's fun. You know, sometimes you find yourself stumbling upon a joke that is just too easy. It's almost not even worth bothering to acknowledge out loud. Like when someone goes, "God, this is so hard," and your first instinct is to say, "That's what she said." But your second instinct is to just sigh and move on, because there's nothing you can say that would add anything of value to the statement. There aren't many jokes about these guys you can make that won't be wholly derivative of jokes other people have made, so I'll avoid comparing the living failures to myself, my friends, my family, or any public figures. Instead, I'll talk about their fight. The living failures require an interesting hit and run technique wherein you could easily kill them in a one-on-one, but if you give them a chance to surround you, they'll be crowding you like that meme about that girl on the sofa. They are really slow, but they hit like a bus and sort of quietly shuffle around the arena after you. You have to run in, hit one a few times, and then zoom away before the others can make it over to you, and repeat. If you get caught by one of their attacks, it'll probably do significant damage, but it won't be the end of the world. The only issue is their huge meteor attack. But it's a weirdly organised apocalypse in that it always rains down from the same side in the same direction, and the single flower in the centre of the arena serves as ample protection so that you could just squat behind it like a drunk student taking a shit. Lovely, now we're actually starting to get into bosses that took more than one attempt. The Bloodstarved Beast took me about 3 attempts in all, and I loved every second of them. She's very fun, scampering around with a bath towel on her head like men playing women in TikTok videos, flicking poison across the floor like sad confetti that will eventually poison you if you loiter in it for too long. Like a toddler after too many M&Ms, she pelts around the arena faster than you can see, and it's a huge trouble to keep track of her, even if you're locked on. Also, like a toddler, her poison AoE is very dangerous, but you should have enough antidotes on hand by now in your nappy bag that it won't be a problem. She has some basic melee attacks that can do devastating damage due to those crazy claws, but she doesn't really become a problem until her final phase, during which she can, should she manage to land a grab, kill you in only one hit. Still, the final verdict is she's fun but smelly, and that's not stopped me before. The amygdala fight is the perfect representation of finding a huge spider in your shower. There it is, suddenly, almost offensively, dropping into your life with all its arms and legs, catching you unaware and vulnerable, and scaring the absolute shit out of you. When in actuality, it probably best represents the opposite, considering how much of a pushover this thing is. I walked in and asked, how the fuck am I supposed to beat this thing? But 2 attempts later they were dead, so it can't be that hard. To my knowledge, I don't think this dimensional amalgamation of limbs and knowledge can be parried, but I've been wrong before. Besides, Amy's attacks are pretty easy to avoid, but their arms have insane reach, especially as they move through their phases and end up tearing off their own limbs to bludgeon you with. Amy also has that classic huge boss gimmick of creating invisible shockwaves with many of their attacks, so even if you think you've dodged something well, you might get sent back to the lamp on your ass. Sometimes they'll just be sick on you too, which is nice. You could just stab their arms, but they have crazy defense specifically to prevent you from taking the easy way out, so you mainly have to go for their head and upper body. Their head takes hella damage, so you can fire up a bunch of ranged magic attacks for crazy damage and then go in for the visceral. Honestly, I was a bit taken aback randomly running into this guy in Yahar Ghul, but the summons probably should have clued me into the fact that things were about to go down. I know you can fight him earlier if the sackmen kill you and drag you over to the Hypergean jail, but I'm a fucking pro and I learned about that after after beating the game because I'm great. Paul is very quick, sort of like a huge blood-starved beast, but with lightning instead of poison, and he damages you as he runs into you, so you have to be quick on the dodges unless you want to be taken out by a hitbox the size of a double-decker bus. FromSoft learned a lot from Sif's fight, so you can no longer just squat underneath him and slice at his ankles until he cringes himself to death. So he's got a spicy electricity AoE to make sure that you can't stay comfortably under him for too long. If you stagger him, he'll go out like a blown light bulb, and you'll have free melee rain on him until he regains the spark in his relationship, and if you come back later especially, you'll find him to be more than manageable. You'll probably die in the first instance by virtue of being taken unawares. The sheer surprise of walking into this innocuous little garden and randomly getting sicked by some big skeletal dog will make your heart give out the first time, but once you've collected yourself together, you won't have an issue with him. This boss had an interesting execution. Tucked away high on the top of Cathedral Ward, this strange little goober gank fight reaches out of the soil beneath their bare feet, and you blink and suddenly there are 12 of them. Whack away at them for a while, enjoying the squelchy sound they make when you punch them, and they'll get sick of being bullied and one will suddenly grow due to the sheer force of their rage. Kind of like Clifford the Big Red Dog, except they're blue, and it's not love that makes them grow big, it's blind fury. But basically the same premise. The little ones will keep respawning, or blooming I suppose, and you have to focus your time and energy on Big Chungus while they follow you round and get you stuck in corners, or in that little nook between the stairs, the platform, and one of the pillars that I got trapped in more than once and unceremoniously beaten to death in. The big one can kick up a storm and does get access to some meaty moves, including some devastating magic attacks, but as long as you're not too greedy like I was and take your time beating up these reasonably defenseless alien children, you should be okay. She's alright. I guess it depends on your playstyle. I can't remember if she took me one attempt or two, but I found her quite okay, even without parrying. Just got to be quick with the dodges, stay close unless you suddenly need to be really far away, and don't get greedy. I know some people absolutely hate this fight, but I don't feel strongly either way. She's quick and her attacks do some insane damage, but the strongest ones are at least well telegraphed, and at the very least you can tank the damage of the lighter ones, so you'll at least be able to stay on top of the fight with some tactical heals. She's one of the first bosses in the series with a whopping 3 phases, a gimmick that starts to get very common in the games preceding Bloodborne, and in her third phase she starts dishing out fire and blood damage as she gets desperate, which is pretty metal, so you can end up getting pretty spiced up without even noticing. I got through this fight trading a lot of damage. I'm not proud of it, but I beat her, so I guess I don't really care that much. She's got a lovely outfit and an even lovelier weapon. It's just a shame you have to take a visit to the world's worst well if you want it.
Majestic!
Mikolash is a lot like Louis C.K. For all his great lines and tremendous insight, he's certainly memorable for all the wrong reasons. Host of the Nightmare? More like host of the Shitemare. Mikolash's boss fight is a dick suck, simple as that, especially for speedrunners. You chase this guy around like a dog with a stolen chicken tender, trying to herd him into the correct room so that you can pelt him after him and slap him about, twice, all while avoiding the most pathetic set of personal guard I've ever seen. For all the time you waste chasing him, his attacks are crushing and can end the fight faster than a coughing fit on the tube. It's still the great COVID-19 quarantine of 2020, by the way. Those jokes are still relevant right now. It's contemporary humour and you probably wouldn't get it, future person. His tentacles somehow parry you, so unless you want to riposte, sending you right back to square one, you'll glue yourself to his side and keep him stunned. His call to beyond attack will also kill you if all the projectiles hit. Even just half of them will seal the deal, so boot him in the nuts whenever you see him winding that one up to keep him staggered, or just dodge and hope for the best. I missed a telegraph once or twice and I just die, which introduced a lovely element of teeth-grinding frustration. Yeah, this big pile of turds is in the top 10. I feel like half of you are laughing right now. How the hell does this girl find ROM difficult? I blasted through her in a few seconds. The other half of you are solemnly shaking your head. Absolute unit. I spent a day on her. Because it can go either way, and I know it can. The first time I fought this overgrown loofah, I ended up needing to summon and still died 20 times. Damien of Mentis and I got our shit pushed in over and over and over again, be it by the 60 odd spiders she summons throughout the fight, the melee thrashing she does when she gets too close, or the insane meteor smash she drops in her head like a cartoon anvil when she's decided enough is enough. It was mostly the meteor, thinking back on it. She was one of the hardest bosses in the game for me. I came by on my next playthrough with a wad of electric paper and beat her before she could teleport even once. That is always the way. The meteor will always kill you if it hits you, so you may as well just not even let her throw one at you in the first place. For all his final bossness, GEHRMAN the First Hunter is not too hard, especially if you've done the chalices and the DLC beforehand. He's at least harder than Murgo's Wet Nurse and the Moon Presence combined, which is what you'd hope for in a final confrontation, but still a bit underwhelming. I don't remember much of the fight because it's quite a blur, but it's a fun blur from what I remember. I decided to try and learn how to parry during this too, so I remember just firing my gun off randomly and running out of bullets really quickly, managing to get a few parries under the belt there by pure luck. The first phase is okay. You're just fighting some dude in Victorian finery. Then he gets all floaty and starts flitting around like a flirty river nymph, and all bets are off. You have to stay on your toes because he pressures you hard throughout the fight. He's super aggressive, like the guy who sells squirts of perfume in club toilets. But he wasn't an absolute pain in the ass, and he can quote me on that, so at least he has something for his CV. Believe me, walking through the fog gate to come face to face with Trevor, Franklin and Michael was a bit of a surprise. These guys were really difficult for me, and considering you need to take the fight slowly is quite counterintuitive to the lessons Bloodborne has been teaching you so far. Keep them all in your line of sight, duck in when it's safe, land a little combo on some cloaked booty, and then duck out again. There's a huge tombstone to kite them all around too, and I once got one of them stuck on it, so I'd recommend you also accidentally pull that off. It was very useful. Bulbasaur, Charmander and Squirtle each have a different gimmick, melee, mid-range and long-range, but as each one dies and their health each drops, they adopt strategies and abilities from the others and eventually become pretty multifaceted. And then they call in ground support from some enormous snakes. So that was often a run ender for me. When I was running up the steps of the Nightmare Frontier and saw these guys reused as normal enemies, well, I didn't really know what to think. It was probably just, oh shit. Abritus, the crossbreed Priscilla of Bloodborne, just wants to be left alone. Or not. Maybe she wants to be freed? But I don't have a carry case big enough for this intergalactic bug, so I'm afraid I'll just have to put her out of her misery. On later runs when I don't need the trophy, I just leave her alone. I'd love to be able to set her free. She's so docile and she only responds in self-defense, but apparently my character is some inept psychopath, so apparently mercy was never an option. My girl Ebby isn't about to let you get away with it either. Despite her pitiful state, she will absolutely shred you to pieces the second you start mashing R1. She's got an utterly apocalyptic charge attack where she just flies straight at you. If you get hit by her and the tentacles, you'll take a full health bar's worth of damage. I'm not even completely sure how to approach this without taking damage. I can't even get out of the way when she's on the opposite side of the cave. It's best not to give her a chance. Instead, just politely sit between her tail things and just smack, smack, smack. She'll jump up and reposition quite a lot, but as any creeper in the pub will tell you, persistence is key. So, after much debate, I decided not to exclude the Chalice Dungeon bosses, but if I wrote about them to the same magnitude as I did the others, we'd be here until Bloodborne 2 was announced. Consequently, here's a quick rundown of the Chalice Dungeon bosses from easiest to hardest. Loran Silverbeast, the unvaccinated child of Yharnam. Their mum probably drives a Range Rover and refuses to invite the poor kid from school to their kid's birthday party. Beast-possessed soul, just some bloke in a fursuit with a hell of a lot of pyrotechnics. Manny Tabor, proof that if fisting hasn't solved all your problems, you're probably not doing enough of it. Brainsucker, probably the least welcome tentacle creature I've ever seen in a Japanese game. Forgotten Madman. I jumped so bad at their screaming that I lost 12 years off my lifespan. Merciless Watcher. What are you doing in my swamp? Blood-Starved Beast. A fond meeting with an old friend that ends with you being beaten to death in a cellar. Great fight as always. Celestial Emissary. Felt like I was bullying a giant infant with a huge head. 10 out of 10. Thumerian Descendant. Looks like the kind of weirdo you'd catch staring at you on the bus. Sends shivers down my spine every time. Yarnum, Thumerian Queen. Fun but underwhelming. Funderwhelming. Bloodletting Beast. Felt bad for this guy since he has such a splitting headache. Get it? Undead Giant. Generic but deadly. Like being choked to death with a ready salted crisp. Thumerian Elder. Why did you give me the pillars if he can still throw shotels through them? Watchdog of the Old Lords. Who doesn't want a dog made of scabs? Rom, the Vacuous Spider. Same pain in the ass fight, but with a tiny arena, so it's even worse. Eat my shit, Rom. Keeper of the Old Lords. Made me come to respect pizza cutters as far more viable instruments of self-defense. Beheaded Bloodletting Beast. The roof is not my son, but I will raise it. Abritus, Daughter of the Cosmos. Same fight, but with less rocks to get your coattails snagged on. Definite improvement. Loran Darkbeast. His propensity to one-hit kill you is so unbelievably Neo that I'm surprised he doesn't have a burst attack. Abhorrent Beast. Abhorrent Arsehole. Amygdala. Why yes, I do love being killed in a single hit after 10 minutes of solid work. How did you know? Anyway, back to the main game bosses, and here are our top 5. Considering Martyr Ligorius is technically available as soon as you have access to the Forbidden Woods, all the way through to the end of the game, you'd expect him to have a point whereby he becomes trivial through leveling or weapon upgrades. This isn't the case with Logi. He is a true egalitarian, and he will send you packing no matter what level you encounter him at if you don't fight him properly. There are only 2 bosses in the Souls series I learned to parry for: Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, and Martyr Ligorius. Because if you don't, you'll need a hell of a lot of skill to beat him. I mean, yeah, he's got infinite stamina. Yeah, he's unrelentlessly aggressive. Yeah, he never gives you a second to breathe. Yeah, he's got a big cloud of flying knives and an army of ghost skulls. But I will tell you one thing, baby got back. Ligorius is a backstab and parry magnet. In his first phase, he has this attack where he leaps into the air and flies at you, crossing the entire arena to do so, and comes crashing down on you like a nuclear bomb. However, what some don't realise is that that entire jump counts as the attack, so he can be parried at any point during that jump. He'll fall on the floor like a limp rag, and you can visceral him to your heart's content. And if you backstab him during his phase change, you can parry him in his second phase too, and render him the biggest joke in Bloodborne. A small disclaimer, I did not beat Ludwig for the first time solo. I didn't really beat him myself at all. I summoned a fairly innocuous looking fellow who clearly had a meaty fucking build, who waltzed into the boss room and beat Ludwig in less than a minute while I ran around like a headless chicken. Considering everything I heard about him, do I wish I'd soloed him first time? Hell yes. When I came back to solo him later, I already knew what to expect, so in this boss ranking I've probably regarded him as less trouble than he was actually worth. So, Horseman. Weirdly, Ludwig has a similar problem to Mogo's Wet Nurse, whereby he often locks himself into attacks for ages, and you get several seconds to land some really solid hits on him in both of his phases. Yeah, his zooms and weird drippy jumps might actually be insta-kills, but his laser attacks and huge sword swing combos often cause him to commit to the complete wrong area of the arena. So, who here walked nervously into this enormous empty cathedral, immediately spying the burning cleric beast suspended at the opposite end of the room, and very hesitantly and carefully walked all the way over, very anxiously interacted with the beast to see what would happen, and then very awkwardly and slowly left the cathedral, expecting a cutscene to happen at any moment? Who am I kidding? We all did. The symbolism of starting the game with a mere cleric beast and ending it with Lawrence the First Vicar himself is stunning. The visual metaphor of this high-ranking member of the church literally burning in hell, filled to the brim with lava that he can't help but vomit up and leak from every wound as the fight wears on. His moveset is fairly similar to the cleric beast, but with some small deviations, and he does way more damage, especially considering the fire AoE all of his attacks come stamped with like some seal of approval, that hit just as hard as any regular attack, and usually render you dead at a moment's notice. That is until he hits half health and splits in half like a huge twiglet and starts thrashing around in agony, brushing you lightly in the process and ripping you to pieces with a gentle 720-degree spin. Well, I mean, if you didn't guess that the top 5 would be full of DLC bosses, then your faith in me is truly misplaced, and I am eternally flattered. For the rest of you normies, Orphan of Kos takes second place in my personal ranking of the Bloodborne bosses. As with many on the list, the Orphan has 2 phases. As with many on the list, he can be parried and backstabbed. And as with many on the list, I didn't bother to try to. I reckon a parryless, backstabless run at the Orphan of Kos is a challenge run somewhere. I feel very accomplished that my absolute stubbornness and refusal to learn or adapt could, in some circles, be considered an achievement. He does crazy damage and has some insanely aggressive combos, usually when you've gotten him down to a crumb of health, and he just busts out the placenta and pummels you into the sand. He just screams because he's a bit confused, which is an emotion I'm sure we've all felt before. At half health, he grows some pretty wings and gets some awesome postural powers, which is an ability I'd love to have in my dreams, but the only dream abilities I ever seem to get are major nerfs, like when I try to run away from something in a nightmare and my legs are all slow and goopy. Haha! Well, remember all the way back at the start of this ranking when I told you I never bothered to parry throughout the entire game? Yeah, I had a real rough start with Bloodborne. Gascoigne took me 3 days, and at some point during those 3 days I went to parry him and found out I'd run out of bullets, and the experience shook me so much that I completely lost faith in parrying and I never did it again. However, once you've got this guy down with your parry timings, he becomes quite trivial. Parryless, Gascoigne's human phases are terrifying. I would try and hide behind gravestones and kite him around the graveyard, which mostly worked, but I die as soon as I stumble too far into his attacks. He's in theory human, just like you, except he has infinite stamina, does insane damage, has a very wide moveset, and a boss health bar, so he's not really like you, is he? And yes, I know that the music box can be used to stun him, but it's not that much of a trump card. He'll be stunned for a couple of seconds, and that's usually not even enough time to run over to him. Once he changes into a beast, your terrified scurry through the graveyard comes to a bitter end, because in this form he can destroy the gravestones. You can beat him here by getting him stuck on things and throwing molotovs at him, but honestly they don't do crazy damage and I never had enough on me to seal the deal. So yeah, I was stuck on him for 3 days. So this video was voted for by my Twitch subscribers over on my Discord. If watching me get upset over things live sounds like a fun time for you, please head over to my Twitch as linked in the description below and feel free to join my Discord. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, and maybe even share this video if you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching my boss ranking, and I'll see you next time. Thank you as always to my precious patrons, I appreciate you very much, and a super thank you to my editor Shekel for his insane talent.